My name is Cindy Blackstock. I'm Gitxsan. I grew up in northern British Columbia in the huckleberry patches. My father was with the Forest Service back in the 60s and 70s. And so we traveled around to different ranger stations and lookout towers. And when I was 4 years old, I was out there doing my first job, which was picking pine cones and putting them in gunny sacks. And little did I know that there were government people out there hunting for little kids like me to put them into residential schools. But thankfully, I didn't have that same kind of fate. I had big dreams for myself. I always had a dream about that these reindeer would come and take me to all these fabulous places around the world, and that I could dream about going and meeting all these amazing people. And it felt like other people were building fences around me, and I never understood why. But I never accepted those fences, even though sometimes they took on a lot of power. I was always a dreamer. But I also was never a leader. I did not want to lead. I wanted to fold into the population. And part of that was just low self-esteem. I guess those kind of messages did kind of take root. I was scared stiff of public speaking. And yet I had this very deep voice that everybody would hear. But you know, I think that's it, is that we run away from our own light. We allow these negative messages to build bars around us. We put ourselves in these prisons if we're not aware of it. When I was doing child protection, and I started to see that the children coming into child welfare care were often coming into child welfare care for reasons that are really beyond the ability of their caregivers to control on their own. The multi-generational trauma from residential schools, the poverty, the lack of services that meant that addictions would take hold as a coping mechanism. All of that, and people were just providing these Band-Aids. They were codifying this as a personal deficit. It was just always the way it was. You know, First Nations kids, they got less. They got, you know, inferior services. It was just the way it was. It was so normal, the discrimination. So I knew two things. One, someone needed to do something, and number two, that wasn't gonna be me. And there was an elder who finally said to me, you know, why are you being so selfish? And I didn't understand what she meant. I thought, we're selfish. What do you mean selfish, right? Here I am working with all these families. And she said, no. She said, you were given, this is an old voice. You have to use it. And it's not your story you're going to tell. It's a children's story. And once I realized it was about telling stories, about weaving a narrative in a way that would, as the elder said, they said, your job, Cindy, is not necessarily to always change the way they think. It's to change the way they feel so they can change the way they think. But once I got that in my mind, then it became a lot easier. It felt a lot more authentic.
Good morning, tribunal members. What a great honor to stand on the lands of the Algonquin Nation and to have this the very sacred conversation blessed by the elder this morning.
When we filed the case at the tribunal, and all of a sudden the federal government cut all of our funding. And, you know, we had a very supportive board who knew this was the right thing. Our staff were on board with it. But then I looked at our bank account and we had $50,000, and what the heck are we gonna do with it? That was a scary moment because there was so much at stake for the kids. There was no way of knowing if we would ever be successful against the Canadian government. But then I realized that in that moment that the one thing we could show these children is that we love them enough to stand with them. That we'll stand with them in the winds of discrimination so they don't have to stand there alone.
A major step forward in a 16-year legal battle. The Canadian Human Rights Tribunal has approved a revised...
Well, I got the decision. I was actually at a restaurant. It came in a PDF file. And I still remember, like, it was almost like the whole world froze. And I saw this thing and I thought, I didn't even want to open it because, I mean, once you open it, there's no going back. All I could think about is the thousands and thousands of children's lives are going to be touched by whatever's on that paper. And then I read the first line and it said, this decision's about children. And I knew it would be okay. You know, women and girls have such an important contribution to make in society. And sadly, colonialism has introduced a lot of patriarchy, including in our own communities. But at the end of the day, I really think it's the women who can have the courageous conversations, who are prepared to talk about what really self-government is. As Terry Cross, a friend of us both, has said to me, he said, self-government is when you can embrace what hurts. And I think we're at that phase where we have the confidence and that multi-generational strength to embrace what hurts. One of the things I found most important is that you know what your values are. Often we aren't our best selves because we're afraid. We're afraid that someone could maybe take away our job, or maybe they'll criticize us, or maybe we won't fit in. But when you think about your values, if those are the most important things to you, then you have a special power. And just that knowledge that at the end of the day, tomorrow, you can look at yourself and you can say, I honored those values that were passed down to me the best I could. And I didn't give them away to that dark energy on the other side. Then that's a life well lived. My destiny is to be forgotten, and that's the way I want it. I only want to be remembered in terms of any kind of positive ripple of change that maybe a generation of children I'll never know will be able to experience in a good way.